Good evening. Welcome to The Pipeline. My name is Cory Morgan. I'm a columnist with the Western Standard. I'm usually in one of the panel spots on the end, but Derek Fildebrand's indisposed today, so you got me hosting this thing. It should be quite fun. We got a lot to cover, great stuff to break down and dissect. So I'll start, though, with who's joining me today. To my right, we do have our opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford, as always. So.
Full of opinions again today, Cory.
Well, good. It would be a slow show if you were bereft of them.
Well, it's been known to happen, then I have to fake it. But today's a good one. Okay,
well, and joining us remotely, we have Erika Barootes. Thank you very much for coming on to talk to us today and add a much nicer perspective for our show than we typically offer.
Yeah, I think it's an upgrade from Derek, I'm pretty sure.
Well, this is our way to find out if he's actually going to watch this or not.
There we go.
All right. Well, thanks for joining today, guys, and lots to dive into. So I'll kind of start giving a little background on a story that's Albertan. We got the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. So it's known as AIMco. It's been kind of a political football for a long time. It's the group that manages things like a public pension funds. I believe it manages the Heritage Fund. Perhaps Erika can confirm that for me. It's a whole whack of money that they are in charge of managing. And there's always been a lot of discussion whether it's managed correctly or, properly. And Premier Smith has just dismissed the entire board of AIMco, and she's going to be replacing them. And, we're going to discuss whether that's a good thing or whether some of her choices are going to come about or not, some of the rumors and what we should be looking for. So I'll start with Erika to kind of break down. Erika, there's been I'll get the background on you as well. Of course, this Erika Barootes, head of applied politics at Macquarie College and senator-elect as well. So, Erika, what's going on with AIMco?
Yeah, well, I think we use, because it's called Alberta Investment Management Company or Corp, and it's been very mismanaged. So I'm glad to see that the government stepped in. One of the biggest things that they addressed is this huge increase in salaries. I think that was about 29%. You saw about 71 in benefits, a lot of like third-party management. So long story short, if this was my financial planner, I'd grab my money and run. And I think that that's the intention this government is trying to make. It was maybe a little less finesse than they wanted it to be with announcing the appointment of interim CEO and the Minister of Finance taking over as the board chair. But I think it's going to go in the right direction. This dates back for mismanagement of this fund and it does include the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, as you mentioned, Cory, for decades. So I think this is a good correction. Maybe didn't land as soft, but there's a lot of support for this, I think, because at the end of the day, Albertans want their management company and the funds to be working for them. The speculations have been, and I believe I actually read a Western Standard article about this, with the potential of Stephen Harper being named the chair. We'll find out in 2 to 3 weeks' time, as the Minister of Finance said that it's about 30 days for him to be this interim Treadwater board chair. So I don't know. I think Mr. Harper's got a lot of good things going for him right now. He would be managing $170 billion, but I'm sure there's lots of things knocking down his door for opportunities. So I would actually probably be a little bit surprised, just based on some recent conversations I've had with him and his team, that he takes it. But it's Alberta, so we can never be too surprised.
Well, Nigel, you're, of course, very familiar with former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. I mean, he's certainly well qualified as an economist and knows his stuff when it comes to the finances and numbers. But what would he bring to the table? I mean, if he just as an act of masochism and interfering on a semi-retirement took on the head of AIMco?
It would be hard to imagine it for all the reasons that Erika just offered there, that frankly, it seems to me that he's having the time of his life at the moment with the travel and his consultancy and some other business interests that he has. But there is one thing, and I'm going back a long way here, there is one thing that I recall him saying, gosh, it was over lunch about 20 years ago. It was before he even ran for the leadership of the Canadian Alliance. He just, in fact, announced that he would do so. And I asked him, well, why would you do that? And he said, I just want to see good government. And, you know, he is an Albertan. by adoption. And I know that he and Danielle Smith know each other. And it wouldn't be so far out of reality to say, you know, for the sake of good government, I'll put this thing on its feet, and then we'll see where we go from there. So, whereas I think Erika is probably right, those who want to believe it, that would include every journalist who's had his hands on the story. Yeah, those who want to believe it could take some hope from that. He's a project man. He likes to get things done and done right.
Yeah, well, and again, at least for political intrigue and journalism, I mean, it's a known quantity and would bring about a lot of discussion as opposed to, you know, just another economist whose names aren't necessarily household names who would be perhaps very competent, but not as known. So setting aside then who might be running this, Erika, like what are the risks I see with this when you do potentially politicize a fund? And not saying that former Prime Minister Harper would do so, but there's been discussion of, you know, we should use those funds for investing within Alberta, or we should use them to shore up this project or that. And that's where I start getting concerned. What protections are there to ensure that the new board and head are not going to be, you know, using partisan interests rather than the Albertan interests when they manage this fund?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, should there be a political appointment, that's something that the government's going to have to be ready to defend in their resumes. So, for example, I mean, you could say that Stephen Harper would come in, but I think I would categorize him as an economist first and someone that, you know, is very understanding of the Canadian, international, and Alberta market, finding the best opportunities. We saw Ray Gilmore, who was the former deputy minister of Exec Council, meaning the premier, and he's kind of the boss of all the deputy ministers, move over to be interim CEO. I would suspect he'll probably stay. I mean, it would be weird to leave and to go to a Crown Corp for a short period and then come back. The political risks, you know, getting the not the right people in there are something the government's going to have to consider, because as a Crown Corp, it is an independent body. But you know what? There's a lot of conservatives out there that know how to manage money. They know how to look at the market, read what is in the best interest of Albertans while protecting their pensions. And so I think, you know, we'll see the left try to politicize whomever, frankly. But, you know, when it comes to who can best manage money, I would probably bet on a conservative than I would on a liberal or a dipper. So there's going to be criticism. I think we'll just see who the government appoints. And again, there's a clear mandate of what they're supposed to do, and it's act in the best interest and give value add for Albertans' money. So, you know, there's not really, I think, necessarily a strong political lens that you could put on this, because math is math and economics is economics.
I think the danger in the past when Alberta has got into investments, it's usually been to further some political objective, and that, of course, is not a good reason to put your money behind any project in particular.
I think that's too, just to me, being political is too risky to not put above strong economic an argument for strong economics.
So, Nigel, I want to throw you a curveball. It just kind of occurred to me too, though. The concept of an Alberta pension plan kind of got put onto the back burner for the time being, but I don't think it's disappeared. One of the concerns people would have is whether or not Alberta would manage their own pension plan better than the federal entity would. I wonder if this could be laying a little of the groundwork too, of saying, look, we've got the mechanism, we've got the ability to manage such a plan, and restructuring AIMco could be a way of also bringing people in who are more receptive to taking on that as another investment to manage. Well,
that is not actually a curveball, Cory. It's that has already been run past my ear once before, that this is, as you say, laying the groundwork. And it would, if that is in fact the plan, it would probably require somebody with the moral authority, never mind the financial expertise of Stephen Harper, to even get that rolling. So that could be where this tantalizing rumor is coming from. The problem, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, how they could stick handle this, Erika, is if the Alberta Pension Plan were ever to be approved by Albertans, the next step would be to go to the federal government and say, give us our share of the money. And if Alberta actually had the share of the Canada Pension Fund that has been already discussed, it would seriously impair the fund for the rest of the country. It would be a very hard thing for a prime minister to agree to. It would be very easy for the present prime ministers to say, no, go away. But when you have a conservative prime minister, the issues are going to remain the same. You'll notice I'm making certain assumptions about the political future of this country. That has always seemed to me the biggest stumbling block to going ahead with the Alberta Pension Plan. How do you think that the government of Alberta would find its way around that problem?
It's interesting, this hypothetical that may become reality in a year from now, that we do have a conservative prime minister led under Pierre Poilievre. And he's actually come out and said, this, because of how much revenue Alberta generates, and if we were to pull out our funds, it's left with very little. It would be very hard for a prime minister to side with this, right? I mean, that becomes not in the best interest of entire Confederation, while still recognizing that the current system doesn't benefit Albertans. I think how I would position this, if I was still advising Premier Smith, is I think she's got to build up the education to other provinces. We've seen Quebec and Saskatchewan try before, or Quebec successful. Ontario, I think, reviewed it. And I think she's got to start familiarizing the other province that are actually at a loss with the CPP structure, in order to actually get that support from the rest of Confederation, which that's a lot of explaining and a lot of time, but I can't see from a political standpoint for Pierre to give a thumbs up and take away that revenue. So it's going to be a tricky one, a very hard stick to handle. And I do think that, one of the other pieces is it does have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. Like you said, a referendum is what the premier or the government has committed to on pensions, or at least, further consultation and education. And that we're also looking at, if this is how AIMco is currently managed, we're going to need an entity, either a new version of AIMco or an entity that could manage it, because I don't think the faith of Albertans lies currently in the management system that we see. So I think it's a long stick to wrangle. And we're going to see a lot of probably hesitation by our federal counterparts, regardless who's there.
For all of those reasons, plus the ones we discussed earlier, I'd more or less close the book on this until after the next federal election. That would be to press hard on this at the moment, would be to hand the Liberals a very strong hand in combating.
Yeah, and I think Premier Smith's battles with the federal government right now are kind of on point. She's talking about an emissions cap, and the unrealistic 2030 plan by the federal government. So I think she's going to win with those fights. This might be one that it's a David and Goliath on the pension side of things.
This could be part of the incentive to put a person with more of a statesman background running the fund, as opposed to economists, where there's a lot of them. I mean, ideally, if I could dig up Hayek and reanimate him and put him in charge of this thing, I would, but he might not be the best person to sell it to the other provinces or make Albertans feel confidence in the management. So it just kind of adds another element to the choice on who you're going to have representing the head of this thing.
Yeah, the road to serfdom is not a selling proposition, is it?
You're going to have time to chew through.
I do have a question, though. I know I'm not the host, but do you guys see a challenge for the government in, if they do go about this new structure that they've announced as part of the reforms, being the pension, because they've kind of tabled it? Do you see Albertans supporting that, especially from your listenership, or do you think that it would be difficult to kind of pivot back to something they haven't even been talking about for months?
Erika, it's a very strange split personality that we display in Alberta when it comes to the things you were talking about a moment ago, about the emissions cap, about the general attack on the Alberta sovereignty, and about the destruction of our energy industry. It's amazing how quickly you can get people to put up a flagpole and put a bonny blue flag there, and they're Albertan all the way, right up until the moment when it comes to, well, where's my pension coming from? I don't know about this. I know the Canada Pension Plan is there for what it's worth, but at least it's something, and it's a demonstrated entity. And then all of a sudden, they're not such bold Albertans anymore. So I think it's a fair question. I don't know whether I've given you a good answer, but boy, oh boy, we do have a split personality when it comes to Ottawa.
Yeah, and I agree with Nigel. Like, I actually toured a bit on some speaking events promoting an Alberta Pension Plan, and you know, the misgivings people have. There's a couple of big question marks still. We're waiting still. It's late now, of course. The Parliamentary Budget Office report on what they say the Alberta entitlement would be to a pension capital if they left the plan. Because I think most people kind of agree that the initial report was perhaps a little too generous in its assumptions on what people would get. So people won't grab onto it if you don't know the number. You've got to have a hard number to start with, and we don't have one yet. And the other part of this confidence, as you said, people, when it comes to, well, wait a minute, I'm risking my pension, they want to know it's going to be at least as good as what they're leaving, preferably better. And that, again, comes down to showing the province has to show that they're good at managing money. And AIMco is the first step in showing that, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I think the underlying assumption, and maybe you might challenge us, Erika, please do, but I think the underlying assumption is that the federal government will never run out of money. It will just print some more if it has to, whereas Alberta does not have that sovereign privilege. Therefore, if it's a matter of receiving an entitlement, then or even something that you is not an entitlement, but you still expect to get, like OAS, there is that confidence that whatever it's worth, it will come from the federal government.
I think that's true if we're looking at the government of today. If we look at the government potentially under Pierre Poilievre, he's not really likely to necessarily print money in the same fashion in which we've seen. He wants to balance a budget, not send our great-great-grandchildren into debt like this current administration.
Okay, well, a lot of it comes down to waiting and seeing anyways, but lots to watch for at least economically inclined political geeks like ourselves. Before I turn the page on to the next issue, maybe I'll bring up and just remind folks on how we pay the bills around here as an independent media outlet, and that's through subscriptions. So please, guys, if you haven't subscribed to the Western Standard yet, get on there, westernstandard.news/subscription. Take one out. It's $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. Just again, you know, the cost of a newspaper subscription keeps so many reporters, other employees, producers, the rest working, and we can keep bringing you this content. So thank you all who have subscribed already. If you haven't yet, get on there, take out a subscription. Like I said, get one for your liberal Uncle Louie for Christmas. Drive him crazy. It'll give you something to talk about over the dinner table when the time comes. And maybe you'll help turn him over a little bit, or at least you'll just work them up. It's all the more fun. So check it out, westernstandard.news/subscription. So yes, you know, kind of pointing out the season we're in, we just went past Remembrance Day, you know, a huge holiday, particularly in Commonwealth countries, you know, basically in memory of starting in, you know, with World War I and still honoring our veterans ever since that point. We do that every November 11th. Unfortunately, this year, I mean, we always see a little bit of problems, but it appears this year we had more distractions and attempts to hijack this very important ceremony than we've ever seen before. I don't know where to begin with this, Nigel.
Well, it's I mean, let's begin with a bit of a catalog of some of the things that we've witnessed that we're not accustomed to seeing on Remembrance Day. So there was a Muslim lecturer in Toronto who hurled an obscenity, the F word, at Canadian veterans during a march past. You know, this is a university lecturer. They're educating young people. One hopes that they don't keep their job, but that's the mentality that is obviously abroad in that department. You have Hamas supporters trying to memorialize their terrorist leader who was killed in Gaza recently, but using the motif of the poppy and memory, lest we forget to do so. Highly offensive to people for whom the Remembrance Day tradition has been an important part of the latter part of the year since it was established back in the 1920s. You know, it's our celebration, and it's for men who were faithful and true to their country, not for terrorists. You have then there's a plan apparently to hoist the Palestinian flag at an official reception in Regina next week. It's not part of Remembrance, but why, you ask? You have an Ottawa school here offering an Arabic hymn as a part of its Remembrance observation, saying they were just trying to be more inclusive. Obviously, they don't understand. Then there's another school that didn't understand, and it said if any veterans come to the school for Remembrance Day, would they please not wear their uniforms? Now, that got scorched very quickly and very hard. But you know, somehow or other, we failed to pass on this very important sentiment to people now in a position to honor it, and none more so than the chaplains in the Canadian Armed Forces who have been told they can't pray. You have a parade, it's Remembrance Day, you're thanking God for your deliverance from very, very dangerous, exceptional events that had whole countries in a state of heightened anxiety from 1914 to 18, from 1939 to 45, and then for hundreds of thousands of men who served in other areas where they were at risk of getting killed. Korea, you know, just ahead one, but all the peacekeeping missions, and latterly in Afghanistan. But please don't wear your uniform. So, you know, I don't know what it is that we've lost other than a common collective sense of what these things are. But I do believe it starts at the top. I am personally of the view that this present federal government does not value military honor. It's a little embarrassed by it, and they want something different out of their military. And I would hope that a future government, the kind that we were speculating upon, would message from the top that this is a big deal. It belongs to the people it belongs to, and that there would be some kind of discouragement for people who want to insult the troops as they march past.
Well, that kind of lines it all up, you know, and I'll leave it to you, Erika, maybe just a little bit. What do you think with what's the motivation of the people distracting from this disrespect for something that's been so long held? I mean, you know, they're not, they have their own political chips on their shoulders and things they're trying to push, but they must know that they certainly aren't gaining any popular support in this country by pulling these stunts.
Well, frankly, I don't care what their motivation is. If you don't want to acknowledge the veterans that fought for us, gave their lives for us to ensure we have our freedoms, sit down, shut up, and stay home. That's how I feel about it. Fortunately, the Legion I'm a member of, and I won't name it just so that if it gets caught wind by the left, that they'll go rat on them. But our chaplain actually, and in our program, we did have a prayer, and I was very thrilled to see that. We had a very traditional Remembrance Day ceremony, exactly what it should be. Again, I don't understand why you think that this is an opportunity for you to make it about you. There's very clear individuals in which we should be taking the time to thank, appreciate, remember on November 11th. And if that doesn't include you, either shut up or stay home.
Amen to that. You know, there's one other thing, Erika, that perhaps is a little more hopeful, and it's this. We still have the capacity to be scandalized by people who try to adopt the memory and the motif that goes with Remembrance Day. It obviously still matters. That is why groups such as those that support Arab terrorism, Hamas terrorism, choose to do it. Like, nobody tries to hijack St. George's Day or May Day. You know, it is. They understand that the public sentiment for Remembrance Day is actually still pretty strong, and that this is the one to go after, not the holidays that nobody really cares about, or try and invent one of their own which nobody would listen to.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, that it is something that it will get attention. Again, I think you're right. Under the current administration, we don't have harsh penalties for individuals not doing peaceful protesting. We don't have harsh penalties on, making sure that they can say whatever they want, but you don't need to come in and ruin a Remembrance Day ceremony. We don't send a message that terrorism is wrong. We don't support our military to the level that we should. And I really hope that changes under a conservative government. Unfortunately, I think you're right. That tone is set from the top, and we have a prime minister that cowardly won't stand up and say exactly what I said. If you don't like it, sit down, shut up, wait till tomorrow, and go do your little protest.
So going beyond Remembrance Day too, though, I mean, and going beyond the federal government, our municipal leaders just keep dipping into this divisive mire. I mean, I'm just shocked. Regina is going to hoist the Palestinian flag on November 16th. I mean, then we're going to try and hoist it on Remembrance Day. Okay, they're that cognizant at least, but why? Why is a city in the middle of the prairies dipping into a Middle Eastern conflict with something they know is going to be inflammatory? I mean, I'm pretty partial to the Star of David, but I don't want to see it raised at city halls. It has nothing to do with what's going on here. We can have our concerns, but this is happening across the country. Civic leaders are really pulling us into these conflicts. And I think some of that is what's also led to the last loss of respect and the things that are overriding into things like Remembrance Day.
Do you think it's cowardice, or do they just not understand?
I'm mixed with the whole thing. I think some of it's sissy. Like, why would you want to hoist that unless you actually supported it?
I'm going to say I think it's intentional. We just saw a Saskatchewan election, and in Saskatchewan, they also do their municipal elections. This is a time where Scott Moe just lost a significant amount of seats, especially in urban centers. I think that this is that new administration sending a message in the city of Regina. That's my home city. Like, I'm sorry, I cannot believe that that's something that they're doing. And if you're gonna put one flag up, you better be damn well putting the other up, because there are individuals. But to your point, Cory, that's not a place of municipal politics. They're not supposed to be partisan even in how they are elected, let alone the messaging that they're talking about international terrorism. So I think that this is where, and I'm all for small government. I hate nanny stating. Sometimes I criticize this government of getting involved in municipal politics. But this is where the provincial government, I know he's not in the most powerful position, Scott Moe, but he needs, because they oversee the municipal government, slap their hands, do not let this go forward. And I bet you there's a lot of people, whether quiet or loud, that would really appreciate not having their municipal government fly that flag next week.
Well, since we're leaving off on Saskatchewan, maybe we'll kind of move on to the next subject. I mean, it's one of the things that, as we said, that we can take some confidence into, though. Most Canadians were appalled by seeing any, distraction from a ceremony that is so important to them. And hopefully it puts them on guard and maybe brings up some of the things to stop these things happening down the road, because it's just an embarrassment and a distraction from something that's so important. So,
one of the problems is the kind of people who tend to run for municipal government are often what we call woke. I mean, we have our own Mayor Blondek, who chose her Remembrance Day remarks to remind us that we were settlers, and just have this kind of anti-mainstream of history approach to things. And obviously, self-evidently, we have people who think that way in Regina, but they also need to be stopped. And your point, it's time for the provincial government to just say no.
Well, it is, and so we'll get into the Saskatchewan election, as Erika brought up. It was certainly a loss of support for Premier Moe. A big issue in it was the ongoing, tiresome, and never-ending bloody trans issue. But it's a woke issue, and apparently it looks like the urban centers want mixed genders in children's changing rooms. I don't know, but so the response we've seen from Premier Moe is one of the first promises he's backtracked on now is the changing room policy he promised for children in schools. Is this? So I'll start with you, Eric, since that's Erika, is this your original turf? Is Moe in retreat?
You know what? I was trying to think of this strategy of why he would do this, because I do know folks that were on the ground. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it back. And that issue did come up at the doors. However, you campaigned on it. it's a lot of it has already gone through on the pronouns and things that the bill had, some of the previous bills that the Mo government brought forward. I just think it's a really weird thing coming off an election to walk that back, because what we've seen here in Alberta is maybe not a loud majority, but a lot of support for the stuff that Premier Danielle Smith is bringing forward on parental rights, on trans policies. And I think we're a little bit more robust in our policy than what you're seeing in Saskatchewan. So I think it's a weird thing for him to pick as his first pivot. Now, I can understand if you're like, I'm going to start with the economy, but he won where he won. The people that represent that caucus agreed with that. A lot of people quietly agree with, I think, his policy he was bringing forward. It just, it doesn't make him look like a strong leader. And that's unfortunate, because I think he really needed to put his heels into the ground on some of the campaign promises right out of the gate. And if you got to win back those urban centers, he has 4 years to do so.
Yeah, it's, it was a pretty shameful retreat. It was so soon after the election that he walked it back, and he said he misspoke. Now, that's not the kind of thing you misspeak about. And so he's basically broken an important campaign promise. Certainly it's the view of our own people in Saskatchewan that was the promise that took him over the edge and put him back into a majority position. He was in serious trouble. A lot of people who might not have bothered to turn out and say, well, all right, if you're going to deal with that, that's important to me. It matters to me. We don't have little boys and little girls changing rooms. So we're with you, Mr. Mo. And, hardly any time went back, and you found that Mr. Mo was not with them. A lot of people would probably change their vote right now if there was a mechanism to do that, and frankly, it would serve him right. What I suspect has happened, and in explaining it, I'm not excusing it, but somebody has said, look, sir, we need to focus. We need to put our priorities where they need to be. And right now, the priority in Saskatchewan is health and education. And so just get rid of this issue. Just brush it off to the side. You don't want to spend the next 6 months litigating it with a militant activist group, making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Well, you think so? Yeah, we're absolutely sure, sir. And with that, he went out and said that he misspoke. Now, that's may or may not have been what happened, but that's what it looks like to me. The problem with that, if that is actually what motivated him, is that the issue does not go away, because there is no satisfying activists. You give them this today, they want that tomorrow. It's the old slippery slope argument that nobody believes. But you've only got to look back 50 years and see where the slippery slope has taken you if you look where you were in 1974.
Well, that's with this trans issue. I mean, I think a lot of people are of the mind, I have no problem with trans adults living how they will, and I hope they're happy, and I hope it goes great for them, and they shouldn't be living fearfully or having prejudice applied to them. But as you said, the activists keep pushing the envelope, and this is where they finally, I think, hit the line of no return. I mean, junior high,
line of no return.
Well, yeah, I don't know where it is. But I mean, for most people of common sense, left or right, I think, they'd remember enough of pubescent children when you're overloaded with hormones in junior high and so on and so on. I would have probably chiseled bricks out of a change room to try and look at the girls next door when I was 14 if I could. But it's not a healthy practice for kids. There's a reason we kind of separate and let them grow and mature before exposing them to each other. It's not unreasonable to have gender-separated change rooms. And I think most parents would agree and understand this isn't an extreme stance. Yet this was one that Premier Mo felt was apparently too far.
Yeah, it seems kind of like a miss by him that if he misspoke or was advised on this, that this is now kind of the hill he's going to die on, with maybe some people that, like you said, Nigel, supported him in the election because of those just fundamental things, or the protection that you think those bathrooms hold. And if you're going to argue about healthcare, I mean, there's also a lot of things that children can be exposed to in that. We have a teenager in our house, and explaining those the individual bathrooms. Well, she's shared what some of the kids do in there, and it is definitely not something that parents want their children doing. So, what are we protecting them from? I think is the important question that maybe the Sask government is overlooking, is to protect our children and put them in the safest environment possible, where that opens, I think, up a door. And I think there's a lot of people that supported that initiative, but this like loud and proud activist group won the day. And when you pour fuel on that fire, it's just a matter of time before they find something else that they want to challenge.
All right. Well, we'll see how that goes. So let's move on to another recently reelected, as a matter of fact, leader in a way. The president of the United States, he's made no bones about one of his top priorities is going to be getting rid of illegal, or every other term you want to use, undocumented immigrants or whatever you please. But they got to go somewhere. And some of the concern is that the deportations are going to impact Canada. They're going to head north. Nigel, is this a real fear? What do we got going on?
Well, I think it is a real fear. It's one that the federal government admits that it has, and we have seen in the past how easy it is for people to just walk across the famous Roxham Road. I mean, they closed the gate there. Guess what? People walk around it, and they end up in that same area anyway because it's easy and convenient. Then they get picked up by the RCMP, and then they get taken somewhere and, generally speaking, improve their situation considerably with accommodation and food supplied. But the people doing that usually present a fairly pathetic sight. Their families, they got all everything they own in a couple of suitcases. Much as many of us deplore the fact that we have so little control over our border that can happen, they're not actually the people we really want to worry about. The folks that I would be more concerned about, I have friends who live close to the border, and they're concerned about it too, is somebody sneaking through the woods and not getting picked up. The Americans have got pretty good surveillance if you're going from the north to the south, but I don't think that Canada has any surveillance for people trying to slip across from the south to the north. And the people who have the most to fear are probably the worst of the lot. They're the ones who are going to be slipping across into Canada and becoming a significant security risk. I know that the federal government is aware of the possibility. Whether there's nothing that they have done in their 9 years that makes me think that they know what to do or have the gumption to do it.
Well, I mean, some of it just comes to logistics as well, though. Like we have a massive, long, virtually unprotected border with lots of vast areas that aren't very heavily populated. Mm-hmm. I surveyed south of Milk River along the Montana-Alberta border. It's just a broken down old barbed wire fence. If it wasn't for the concrete survey marker every mile, you wouldn't know you were at the border. So even if the Trudeau government took it seriously and directed resources at it, we just don't have it. We couldn't stop the flood if there really is a flood coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the scary part. It's not one. I don't think the mass exodus under a Trump administration. I think it's a lot of like screaming and shouting and virtue signaling from other individuals going to leave the country, and we've seen the like move to Canada type narrative. I don't think we'll see that, but on the deportation side, I think that we are not the border they're concerned with, but we might be innocent byproduct that, again, we should have learned from what was happening in the South and created immigration policies. But it's almost like a little too late, and we don't have an administration that's going to be implementing that or able to manage it. So it is an unfortunate potential situation. I just hope that the government in the new Trump administration is really focused on what they're trying to do by removing illegal individuals, and focuses on let's get those bad actors, which probably aren't Canadians, out, and get them back to where they need to go. And I think we can all understand why that's something that was so successfully run upon by him, because we're seeing challenges in our own when we don't have the right immigration policies.
I mean, what the Americans say that they're concerned about is not what I was just talking about. They are concerned that terrorists are going to try to enter the United States from Canada. I'm quoting the Tom Homan here, who just an impressive man, actually, but recently appointed by President-elect Trump to be a real border czar.
Right.
I don't know what it is about the border that means you have to be a czar to deal with it, but at any rate,
sounds tough. It sounds tough.
He's the man. But what he is saying is that the problem with the northern border is a huge security issue, national security issue. Special interest aliens, terrorists by another name, from countries the U.S. says sponsor terror, use Canada as a gateway into the United States.
Because of so it's not the south coming north issue, it's the north going south by way of Canada, as opposed to, example, China using Canada as a way over.
Well, so there are two streams of people moving here. One are the ones that Holman is talking about. And by the way, if you think they're going to be a problem coming from Canada, they're already a problem coming across the Rio Grande. Not everybody who crosses the border down there is from Central America. They're picking up people from the Middle East, from Afghanistan, and I believe about 30 people who are ethnically Chinese, wherever they came from. So they know all about people trying to sneak in. But Canada's another place where they can. But my concern is for a different demographic, and those are the career criminals who are from South America, who, if they think that they're going to be apprehended by the U.S. authorities, ICE, get out of here. I don't want to come back where I came from, but maybe Canada will be an easier place to survive.
So are you saying we're damned either way? Is that what you're saying, Nigel?
Well, I think we need, we talk about the world's longest undefended border, but I think the Canada and the United States need to get together and just have a much better grip on who gets.
So we need an election first, because I thought that Trump was going to send Justin Trudeau back.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just going to be a huge task. I mean, in my travels and surveying, I did a lot of work in South Texas near the Mexican border there too. And I tell you what, even with all the resources the Americans put to trying to protect that border, it's porous. They're coming across. The best analogy I can think of is if you stirred up an anthill and you draw a line in the sand, and every time an ant crosses, you can pick it up and put it back on the hill. And they've got all these people doing that all the time, but most of them are just running right by you. And the things we were warned about at our safety meetings is to watch out. 90% of the ones coming were harmless people. They're economic migrants. They just want to get across and try and find a job or go to Home Depot parking lot and make some money, do what they can. But that other 10%, as you said, these are cartel members. These are drug mules. They could be running away from rape charges, murder charges. There's no end to the reasons why they're trying to escape. And if they see Canada as the softer touch farther north, if we can't stop them with all the resources at the Rio Grande, how on earth are we going to stop them up here? So we've got a whole lot on our plate now.
Yeah, I don't want to trivialize the issue, but when I was younger, I used to read Westerns, and it seemed like our bad guys, when they finally ran out of options, always went south over the Rio Grande. And now I don't know, history has a horrible way of paying you back for your trouble.
Well, we'll see if they get scared north or not in the next 6 months or so. I think we'll have a much better idea. Anyways, a whole lot of holding pattern we got going on. So I guess we're just going to wrap things up with the parting shots.
Yeah, well, I guess really I've given away my parting shot.
You gave away mine too.
Oh, did I? What did I say?
I'll get to that.
Yeah, no, like I've just been saying, it's all very well for Homan to say the Canadian border is an extreme national security vulnerability to the U.S., but frankly, given the way our own government handles things, it's more a case with unsavory people scrambling to avoid deportation from the U.S. The American border is an extreme national security vulnerability to us. So let's take that, Mr. Homan.
Okay, and Erika, have you one in the can there? Or?
I do. I think I got real riled up on the Remembrance Day. So mine's just about like being so excited for that woke pendulum to swing the other way so that we have more common sense. We have people that are going to respect history, respect where we came from. And, you know, if you don't like it, you don't need to go scream and shout. Just shut up.
Okay, and before I let you go fully, where can people find your podcast?
Yeah, so we're on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, the whole list. And it's called The Discourse. So it's myself. We just finished filming. And let me tell you, when I talk to an NDPer, my conversation topics are a little bit different. But we drop them every Thursday morning at 5 a.m.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Erika. It was a welcome breath of fresh air from the other host we typically have, I think.
Thanks.
We'll see. All right.
You're so fired.
Oh, yeah. I don't get out of it that easy. And thank you, Nigel, for another good one. I'll let off with my quick parting shot. It's the usual person I shoot at all the time anyways. It ties into the others. It's Mayor Gondek going into the land acknowledgements and all that. Again, we can debate that the other 364 days of the year, whether we need land acknowledgements at all at events or anything, but they had nothing to do with Remembrance Day. They distracted from it. And it was just, again, her failing in the role that she's supposed to be as a representative, as a mayor. So, okay, well, thank you again, guys. And thank you all for tuning in this week to the Pipeline. Keep an eye on all the Western Standard channels. We're out there with a number of shows, including my own and Nigel's show. And be sure to take out a subscription. It's really important. So thank you for tuning in this week, guys. We will see you all again on the next one.